So good evening, everyone. We are at 64, perfect 10. Uh, yeah, as people are joining, we'll not penalize the people who logged in on time or before time. So a warm welcome to this webinar with Leon. Just to set the context, this we call this a Regal Global Webinar. Regal being the firm's name, and we try to get the global community of leaders and coaches together. Regal Unlimited is a boutique firm into leadership development through coaching. That's one-to-one, one-to-many, systemic, all types of coaching, coach training and mentoring, including certifications for ICF, and healing. So the fact that we bring all these three together makes us to some extent unique and different. We are a community of over 200 coaches from diverse background, perhaps all of us now in the second avatar, professionally pursuing a dream career. I started off as a banker, 21 years. Now I'm doing this for the last 9 years. So that's a case with pretty much all the other coaches. We try, our effort and prayers are to give what our tagline says. It's ROI of enchantment. So we kind of try to bring in an element of ROI, return on income, and also not losing focus on enchantment, something much bigger. Yeah, and Leon, one of the things that drives me personally, and the organization is a quote by my guru. It says, "We all are all beings." Okay, I'm trying to remember the exact words. All beings, knowingly or unknowingly, are on a spiritual pilgrimage. So for me, an inanimate object to a human being, we all are on a spiritual journey. Now, the effort through this webinar is to bring in this element of coaching into all leaders and also help coaches grow. That's the stated objective of this webinar. So typically, even this evening, there's a good mix of professionals, leaders, corporate leaders, and consultants, and also a few coaches. Maybe a 50-50, Leon, based on the first cut. Of course, some of them are professionally certified, but they are still on their corporate career, making difference in their respective professional roles. So it's also to spread awareness about professional coaching in this part of the world. Yeah. Now that brings me to this. It's my privilege and honor to introduce the speaker for this evening. When I started my PCC journey in 2013, I was doing it with ICA Australia with classroom sessions here. So we had to attend some online sessions. So when we started scheduling those, sometime 1:30 in the morning and late night, more than one person suggested that look for a trainer, Leon. Right, that was my first introduction to Leon. They said, and all of us, we are 9 of us working with Ram Kocharya. All of us logged into Leon, and I don't think, Leon, we missed any sessions thereafter, right throughout the journey. That was your popularity. Now, what makes Leon unique as a mentor is, the way he holds the space, which is classical coaching, right? And I'm just setting expectations to you because you will experience that now today for the next half an hour, 45 minutes when he is making this presentation and also taking questions. It's a totally empowering, deeply spiritual space. So he is the founder, managing director of Center for Transformational Coaching. So for over 20 years, he has devoted his entire life into personal development and inner leadership. That makes it very unique. Yeah. So he has helped leaders and coaches discover, embody who they truly are, which is the very objective of transformational coaching. He is widely acknowledged as the pioneer and thought leader in the field of transformational coaching and living. Right? It's not about doing, it's about being. He has alumni fan following in over 35 countries. He has written a beautiful book. It's there right behind. I'm reading that now. Something that I would recommend every participant here to pick up. It should be on your library. Because he again brings together elements of leadership, coaching, and much deeper things like spirituality. He's based out of Taiwan, so logging in, that's why we shifted the webinar by an hour to 7 p.m. India time. And thanks for coming in, Leon. It's a pleasure to kick off ICWA incidentally with your session for us. We have been planning it for a very long time, but I always believe everything happens at the right time. And what a better time on day one of ICWA 2021 when the world is going through such challenging times, and every leader, irrespective of the level, position, industry, category, every leader personally, professionally is challenged today. And we are perhaps defining our legacy on how we respond to this challenge. Yeah. Once again, thank you for being with us today and looking forward to a great session. Over to you, Leon.
Thank you, Subhash. That was a very gracious welcome. Thank you. I feel very welcomed here, being here today. Thank you for that. And of course, hello to everyone who's joined us. I'm going to put up some slides. Is that okay? And you can let me know. You can see those okay, Subhash?
Yes, Leon. Yes.
Yeah? Okay. Perfect. Perfect. Yeah. So you briefly introduced me. I'll say just a little more about myself. I don't want to take up too much time talking about who I am, but as Subhash said, I'm the founder of the Center for Transformational Coaching. I opened this in about 2013, when I guess you could say there was a transition in my own coaching that happened from about 2005 when I began coaching, when I was doing a lot of organizational and leadership coaching, sort of in-house coaching. What I noticed was that I was doing a lot of what I now call transactional, bordering on developmental coaching approaches. And I'll talk more about that a bit later. But as I moved away from the corporate world, I started working with people from around the world who were asking for a very different kind of experience in the coaching space. And it was different than I had been doing it in the corporate world. And it was even very different than I was teaching. Subhash mentioned me as a trainer at the International Coach Academy, ICA, and it was even very different from what I was teaching. And yet there was something happening in these coaching spaces that was utterly profound. And it was through those experiences that I began to notice there's a capacity in the coaching space that we're not really tapping into for the most part. And even as I scanned around looking at all the coaching approaches that are out there, and you know there are so many approaches, and I don't mean niches, I mean approaches even. I'm still thinking there's a depth that we can get to in a coaching space that I'm not sure people are even aware of. And yet I was having these kind of experiences. So I began to formulate that into a body of work, which I call deep transformational coaching, or deep coaching for short. And I opened the Center for Transformational Coaching to offer this work to the world. And I've been doing that, as I mentioned, since about 2013. I have been coach training and mentoring for longer, 11 years, including the International Coach Academy. And my background before that was in different kinds of businesses. I started out as a management consultant with Deloitte & Touche for a few years in the United States. I then moved on to Asia, where I started getting involved in personal development and leadership development, doing corporate training programs. And that's kind of where I rested for a while, facilitation and training, until I found coaching. A little late to the shores of Asia. It came about 2005, 2006, was kind of landing here a little bit. And then I got involved in that, fell in love with it, and the rest of it is really the rest is history. But if you look at what the core of my work is, what I really seek to do, it is the healing and advancement of human consciousness. And we do that through a process we're calling a transformational journey. It is actually a process of self-actualization, as Subhash mentioned. We're really coming into our knowing ourselves as spiritual beings at the core. And what that really, really looks like when we get down to that level of self-knowing and understanding. So that's really the core of my work. And as he mentioned as well, yes, I have a book, and just an offer for everyone here too. If you'd like the first 3 chapters for free, just head over to the URL that you can see on the slide. It is the Center for Transformational Coaching.com/book chapters. Now, you don't have to do that right now. You can make a note of that for later, and you can go grab some 3 chapters of the book. And this just give you a sense of the work that I do and the approach that I take to this thing we're calling transformational coaching. Okay. So today's talk, what I would really like to do, I'm not going to load you with this like a ton of information, all these new concepts or anything, but I am going to introduce some some dots. I'm going to call them dots for now, that I have been myself kind of fascinated by lately. And I want to connect these dots for you in the hope to inspire you as a leader and to inspire coaches to really stand even more as the leaders that they are and can be kind of inherently. And the dots that I'm going to connect are really about connecting transformational leadership with transformational coaching. There's something there in that, in the tapestry of that. I think it's important for people to recognize, and hopefully, like I said, this will inspire you in different ways to grow as leaders and even to grow as coaches, like really to grow as coaches. So one of the things that, kind of traditionally when we talk about coaching and leadership, you've probably heard leader as coach. And I know from my own background as well, one of the things that we do is we train or teach leaders to become coaches. So the tools, the skill set, the mindset, so that this leader can become increasingly, coach-like. So I want to turn this a little bit today in this presentation, because it goes a lot deeper than that. It can go a lot deeper than that. Yes, it's true that a lot of training for leaders on coaches kind of has this as the end goal. Like as a leader, I have a new skill set and I can apply this into various contexts and situations. And if it isn't the coaching approach that will work in this context, then I can use another management or leadership skill in the context. But like I said, it can go so far beyond this. And I think what I show you today is going to help you see really why that is, where we can turn it so that the coach is the leader. And it's not about a skill set, and it's not about a tool set and a mindset. It's much more than that. I don't know if you've heard of this book. This is Frederick Laloux's work, and it's called Reinventing Organizations, a guide to creating organizations inspired by the next stage of human consciousness. So I came across this book some 6 months ago. It was recommended to me. And I'll admit, like, I haven't read a leadership book in years, like maybe 10 or 15 years. Like I see them, they just kind of, they don't really hold much for me. So I was recommended this book and I was like, yeah, okay. And I just threw it on my Kindle. And I went on a personal retreat, and this is November or December, and I decided to start to read this book. I've always been inspired myself by this idea of human consciousness and what evolving and expanding human consciousness actually means, and what facilitates not just change, but this real growth of consciousness. So the title caught my eye, and so I started reading this one night, and I started reading, and I'm starting to take notes, and I'm starting to read, and before I knew it, I was practically dancing in the middle of the floor in my hotel room with the excitement that I was feeling about what I was reading. I hadn't read anything like this in the leadership context really ever. And here it was kind of laid out for me in a way that I could readily relate to. Now, I'll explain to you why that is in just a moment, but I do recommend this book too, because again, this is kind of like a bit of a roadmap, if you will, for where it's possible for organizations and leadership to absolutely ultimately go, okay? So it's based on a model that he calls stages of organizational development. And he color codes these. There's red, which he calls impulsive organizations, amber, conformist, orange, achievement, green, pluralistic, and then ultimately at the top, teal organizations, which are sort of for him the end of the line. Now, it doesn't mean that there is not some iteration of organizational capacity beyond teal, but this is what he's calling kind of the next stage of organizational development that is reflective of our advancing and awakening human consciousness. So if you just look through these, I won't go through everything here, but if you just look through these, you begin to see kind of a movement from the bottom, which is organizations based around power and fear and command and control, up through to the orange, which is where the vast majority of organizations exist in this world. It's kind of competitive, profit-driven, objectives and results drive the organization. It can be very innovative. This is not about taking away innovation or anything like that. Innovation is, in fact, one of the core reasons for their existence that helps drive growth and profit and results. But there's a few examples of organizations on the right side that reflect this: universities, schools, many corporations, right? But we're starting to see today a lot of the emergence of what he's calling green or pluralistic organizations, which are really very much about culture over strategy. And they're beginning to hold up, you almost might say, like, we're going to make the world a better place. And it's value driven under that banner, making the world a better place. So through whatever we're doing, it's not necessarily about profit, though profit matters. It's not necessarily about winning, though we want to be competitive. It's about making this world a better place. And the culture matters. In other words, we want to create a culture here where everyone feels that they are empowered, that they belong, that they're engaged, that their opinions matter. So it's very much this idea of this idealistic culture that drives things and drives the people in it. So a lot of tech companies that we're hearing about today, for example, companies like Google, we hear about these amazing workplaces where they live, and the decreasing of the hierarchy of organizational structure, getting flatter and flatter as we go further up this ladder, if you will, of organizational possibility. And then we move on into this evolutionary, what he's calling Teal, or evolutionary organizations. And in his book, he gives a lot of examples of what this looks like. But the reality is there are not a lot of these organizations on the face of our planet today. So it's a very new kind of place for people to be. So he's trying to exemplify what these look like through examples of the way that they operate. And what he's saying is that when it comes to this level, they're really operating from kind of a new consciousness, one that is not just about making the world a better place. It's really about evolutionary purpose, like seeing beyond, far beyond what it is that we do, like the thing we make or the service we offer. It's no longer about that. It's something about much greater than that even. It's about wholeness. It's about seeing wholeness in organizational structures and the people that exist. It's about being deeply authentic with each other and within the organization. So this is what he's calling, I'm just using a few words here to describe what he does a lot better of a job describing than I am here, but what he calls Teal. Okay, so I'll just show you how this kind of manifests as leadership qualities. This is where it gets kind of fascinating. I'll share some of this with you. So let's, for example, you take loyalty to the organization, or just loyalty as a value. So you can see from the bottom, the red, again, loyalty is really to the boss. Orange, we get loyalty to the organization. To the green, this idea of shared values. Like we have our mission, vision, and values on the wall, and we share that. But when you get to Teal, it goes even beyond shared values. So ecocentric values are really values that we see as part of the whole, the holistic nature of things, and the rightness and goodness of the whole and the components of the whole. So it's not just about that we share this handful of values. We're actually starting to see value in the entity and then what the entity is connected into. So it goes kind of even beyond that. When we look at decision-making here, so again, from the bottom, the boss makes decisions. Moving up, goals and strategy drive decisions, values drive decisions. And now here we're seeing at a Teal level, evolutionary purpose drives decision-making. So everything we do is not just about making a sale or even making the world a better place. It's about what is the grand purpose that this organization stands for that is in service of evolving human consciousness. So imagine organizations where every decision is kind of made towards that end versus towards the sale or the profit or the market share or those other things that drive organizational decision-making. Meetings, I found this one fascinating. Again, from the bottom, the idea that those red organizations control through power. Results, more at the orange level, the competitive level, again, results matter. Meetings are about, what we've done, what we're going to do, taking actions, who's responsible, get it done, come back for the next meeting, repeat. As we get into the pluralistic organizations, we really notice, again, the value of diversity and the value of empowerment coming in. So it's always about getting opinions on the table and listening to people and being heard. This is very, very evolved stuff too. Many organizations don't even do that today. So we're not saying that green is some kind of a lower level. It is a movement to something they're calling holding space. Now, leadership and holding space, these words, I hold space in coaching. We hold space in healing, but we don't often hear it used in the idea of how we approach meetings. But again, this is a glimpse of what's happening at these higher levels of organizational consciousness. Work attitude, we see it really, again, this idea of wholeness and systemic wholeness being viewed and shared by the collective. We see personal development. This is another interesting one here. This idea of complete acceptance of others. This is big. Like it's really hard to just say how important that is. The idea of complete acceptance of other people. When you look at organizations today, there are almost always office politics going on, power plays going on. There's silos competing with each other. What would it look like to be in an organization where we are truly kind of in awe of each other? And the goodness, the rightness, if not the perfection of each other. We just see each other that way. And it doesn't mean we agree with everything that you do, but we see the core of the being. So even green, noticing coaching and mentoring coming in and how empathy grows at the green level, such an important stepping stone into this space of acceptance, right? And how coaching and mentoring play such a vast role in green organizations, still in teal organizations, but we see there's a movement to another way of viewing personal development. If we go into leadership styles, again, from command and control at the bottom versus, again, the orange, where we're looking at really motivating targets, rewards, accomplishment, all of that. In orange organizations, accomplishment and achievement are rewarded. It's valued, right? We move into green organizations, it doesn't mean those things go away, but there's more motivation by involving people, making sure everybody feels that they matter in the organization, that they're inspired, that they're engaged, that their opinion matters, that there's diversity, right? So leadership focuses more on how do I empower people, within their capacities, within their strengths. And again, this is why coaching and mentoring is so valuable at the green level. And yet when we move into teal, there's a word, spaciousness. Spaciousness. This is not a word that is often put together with leadership. Spaciousness. Trusting, just trusting. Because one of the qualities of teal organizations is that they're very flat and they're self-organizing. Self-organization requires incredible levels of trust. Because if you don't have trust, then you try to control. And the moment you try to control, then things cannot self-organize. They organize according to how the leadership wants things to organize. So imagine suddenly the hierarchy flattens, things get very spacious. There's an incredible amount of trust and people are given the space and the power to move as they need to create what they need to create. So in these kinds of organizations, we notice that people are very rarely, if ever, siloed into a position. In fact, position titles very rarely work. It's almost as though people are working laterally across a lot of different roles, and even naming what they do can be a challenge in some of these teal organizations because of that self-organizing nature. It's fascinating. Inner motivation, again, trust, intuition, authenticity. So just to kind of summarize some of the key ones that I showed you there about teal organizations and leaders. And this is what I find, again, fascinating, just spending some time with this. When you think about leadership today and what we teach leaders today, when we teach leaders about how to be today, do these words come in? When we talk about open space, holding space, trust, being very intuitive, which means dropping the intellect, dialing that down so you can listen to intuition and trust intuition, and not just within yourself, but within others. In teal organizations, not by far are things decided on data or results or the history of those things. Things can be decided on just intuitively, what feels right in this moment. What is it that we want to create or do together in this moment? And so that self-organizing behavior means that this idea of having long-term planning also goes out the window. because you cannot know what's going to happen down the line if your organization is continually creating itself through self-organization. And imagine the amount of trust that leadership needs to have to allow that, to accept that, to be a part of that. I mean, it's just an incredibly high level of trust. And so what's happening here is that some of you might be thinking, oh, this is not possible. It's not really, I can see a little bit, but ultimately there's going to be command and control coming in. There's going to be silos. There's going to be people hanging on to what they know and demanding things go a certain way. And all those characteristics that we know so well of, particularly the orange organization. These things are hard to get to, Leon. Okay. So it might help just to take kind of a step back for a minute and recognize, okay, Teal represents a new paradigm of consciousness. That's different. That's different because each paradigm of consciousness has its own built-in reality. And the really challenging thing about levels of consciousness is, and by the way, if you ever want to explore this more, Dr. David Hawkins' work in Power versus Force, laying out the map of human consciousness, you begin to see that it's very, very difficult for people in one level of consciousness to even begin to comprehend the reality of another level of consciousness. So if you take an organization that's, let's say, at an orange level, and you decide as a leader that you're going to move it to a teal, it won't work. You will struggle to the ends of the earth. It will be resisted immensely because the readiness of the organization is not there, and the readiness of the people in it for that kind of a leap in consciousness is not there. Consciousness cannot leap, and therefore you cannot leap from an orange level, the competitive, profit-driven, results-oriented, kind of innovation-driven organization, to teal. It evolves there. It evolves there. And we can see that green is kind of this really evolutionary state, because green has people letting go, leaders of so many old patterns of how businesses must work. And they're starting to experiment with things like empowerment and inspiration and coaching and mentoring, and all these qualities of what look like advanced organization and leadership are kind of coming in. It's a playground for leaders in that place. But here's the beauty, it's not the end of the line. And even people who are in green cannot necessarily fathom teal. It's its own paradigm with its own built-in reality, right? So this presents a very unique conundrum, doesn't it? Like, if we are keen to say, well, wow, let's advance organizations as high as they can go, let's take them to teal. Well, how do you advance an organization to teal if the leaders are not teal leaders? And then how do we get people to be teal leaders? This is the big question. This is the big question, because to get there, as it says, evolutionary organizations need evolved leaders. But you cannot just train someone into teal. You cannot, I'll say, you cannot train someone into teal. All the training programs in the world will not move them into teal. They may not even grasp it. They will actively resist it. Okay. So I'm going to present a kind of answer for you. And it's about, now I'm bringing the coaching into it here. So bringing the coaching in. So coaching, if you've taken coaching, I suspect most of you are familiar with coaching as a modality, that coaching teaches things like self-awareness, respect for others, acceptance of others, trust in others, the capacity to see wholeness, potentials, open-mindedness, non-judgment, all these things. This is what coaching teaches. Okay, so now we're starting to see it. Oh, Leon, these are starting to reflect some of those qualities and characteristics of teal leadership. Yes, okay, you're on to me now. You're starting to see the parallels. There's a connection there. So coaches, by nature of coaching, embody progressive leadership qualities just by becoming a coach. So coaches are on the pathway to becoming teal leaders. But I'm going to say very clearly, it doesn't mean you're a teal leader because you're a coach. Now, why do I say that? Because not all coaches are the same. Not all coaches are the same. There are orange coaches, there are green coaches, and there are teal coaches. There are coaches today who are very focused on results, goals, growth through achievement. They are competitive and they support their clients to do all those things. There are coaches today who are very values driven. They're empowering, they're empathetic, they're inspiring. They help people make meaning out of their lives. It's a green coach. And there are coaches today who are living their evolutionary purpose, the highest calling that they can conceive of for themselves, and learning to express that, who are capable of holding incredible spaces in which other people can tap into the reality of themselves, heal. There are coaches today who can view others in this world with unconditional acceptance, perhaps even unconditional love, right? They're deeply authentic, intuitive, but we cannot kid ourselves for 1 second and say, all coaches are that. They are not. You know this. You can go online, do a search for coaches, success coaches, right? Just search for success coaches and you'll get a whole host of orange coaches. If you look for developmental coaches or learning coaches, you'll get a lot of green coaches. The teal coach is still as rare as the teal leader, which is still as rare as the teal human being. So I'm going to put this still in the coaching context a little bit more. This is something I call the coaching continuum. There are 3 forms of coaching or coaching approaches I put here: transactional, developmental, and transformational. Now notice again, orange, green, teal. So transactional coaching really at the core is about thinking and doing differently. We support people to think and do differently. And it's very, as it says, issue focused. It's very results driven, very action oriented coaching. It tends to be externally goal driven. For example, I want to succeed at my position so I can get a promotion. I want to become a better communicator so I can inspire my team. I want to lose weight so I can da 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 da. These external goals and markers, and the coaching drives to those in a linear fashion from A to B, hopefully as expediently as possible, right? In other words, the sooner we get there, the better. The more effective the coaching, the faster it happens. Okay, that's transactional in a nutshell. I talk a lot about this more in my book. Developmental coaching. Okay, so here's what's getting interesting. Developmental coaching is actually the overlap of transformational and transactional coaching. It's this kind of middle ground that has a foot in both worlds, but is neither fully of either world. So here, people are really starting to get committed to growing and changing on an inner level. So it's a place of expanding self-awareness, life progress. People are learning about themselves. At this level, we see a lot of people getting interested in taking things like personality tests and indicators like Myers-Briggs or StrengthsFinder, all those indicators, DISC, all these things, and they're learning about themselves. Very often they're external kind of pointers, if you will, to the internal reality, but they're learning about themselves. They're learning about their creative capacity, their strengths, their talents, how to leverage those. This is the realm of developmental coaching because it touches on the transformational, which is really going in to learn about ourselves, what makes us tick at a fundamental level. Then we get to transformational coaching. This is the realm of beingness. Like, who am I being in any moment? Who do I choose to be in this moment? Who am I being as a leader? Who am I being as a coach? Those are the fundamental questions of transformational coaching. And we're going even deeper. We're going beyond learning about ourselves to exploring this realm of beingness within ourselves. So we're dropping below the surface and we're starting to really look at our inner operating system and what makes us tick and why we experience life the way we experience it. So coaches can move up and down this continuum, but for the most part, coaches have kind of a comfort zone in this. And most coaches, again, in the transactional developmental realm, but some are starting to move deeper and deeper into this place we call transformational coaching. So here's a question I love to ask. Give it some thought for a moment. You might even want to type your answer into the chat box. You don't have to, just going to put it there for you. What is the secret to being a great transformational coach? The secret. If you want to type your answer in, go right ahead. Okay, here I'm going to do the great reveal. The great reveal. Are you ready? Everyone ready? Drum roll. Okay. Commit unwaveringly to your own transformation. All the great transformational coaches have gone the distance of transformation. And if they haven't gone the distance, they're on the path. They've committed unwaveringly to it. It is the single most important thing in their life. Because transformational coaching, when you get to that deep end of self-awareness, when you get that deep end of real self-knowing, of self-actualization, you cannot fake this as a coach. You cannot hang up a shingle or a credential just because you've been, had some schooling or some education, that by nature, you're then a great transformational coach. In fact, transformational coaching is the easiest word for people to throw around in the world, when by far the vast majority of coaching that's happening today is not transformational coaching, at least how I'm defining it, because it doesn't actually go nearly as deep as people think. If we're talking about Teal as a new paradigm of consciousness, we have to talk about how we then evolve Teal leaders. So Teal leaders have gone on a transformational journey. They have transformed their own inner reality. At the essence of it, they have dropped, and I mean really dropped, their ego-based self-concept, their ego-based consciousness, and they have stepped into a far more authentic and real way of being in this world. And it's all about states of being for them. Teal leaders are exceedingly adept in the world of beingness, in navigating being, transforming being. So they embody, they haven't just learned a set of skills, they embody this paradigm of consciousness. And to embody that paradigm of consciousness, you need to transform your own inner reality. So now we ask, okay, so what are we transforming? What are we transforming? Like that aspect of ourself. And it is something in psychological terms we call our self-concept. Our self-concept. So I like this image of the onion, that there is something at the core of our being, our essential nature. Some might call it soul, essential self, deeper self, highest self, that is itself whole and complete. But pretty much from birth onward, we are taught about who we are, what we should value, what we should think, what's important in our lives. And we take this on like layers, layer after layer after layer after layer after layer, until we show up in adulthood. And this is our self-concept. You could call it our ego-based self-concept. For some people raised in a relatively loving and healthy environment, they may have a relatively healthy self-concept. But others who have grown up with trauma, abuse, degradation, they may have a really, really fragile, hard self-concept, really wounded, if you will, a wounded self-concept. Maybe that's a better way to put it. So this is the part that's being transformed. It's not just getting to know ourselves a little bit more. It's a journey of self-actualization. And this little quote I've got here, that transformation then is a process of stripping away all that is not you at the core of your being. All that is not you at the core of your being. And that's the transformational journey. And that is hard. It is hard because we're being asked to look at all the images, the false images about ourselves and about the way life is and the way others are that we have allowed to make a home in our mind. We have to strip away our personas. And we all carry personas, don't we? The persona of the professional coach or the dynamic leader, or the successful one, whatever that persona is, we carry it. We all have limiting beliefs. We all have unattended sorrows, unattended traumas, unattended disappointments. I could talk just in a whole presentation just about this part of our being. And leadership is not exempt from this. But yet here's something I don't hear too often. I don't hear the words leadership and trauma being discussed together. Like we don't know, those are separate, right? But it's not. If you are on a journey into wholeness, to know yourself as who you are at the core of your being, if you would like to be a leader that truly just literally evolves into higher states of consciousness, who embodies the way of these higher consciousness concepts and characteristics, you need to do the healing work on all that stands in the way of knowing yourself as you are at the core of your being. And all the fears, right? All the fears that we carry. When people start looking at this, when they take our courses, we get wonderful people taking our courses coming in all the time, and they walk out and sometimes they're just in awe of how much they have left unattended for so long. And going around and being successful and doing what they love to do, it's not about that, but recognizing the depth of what they carry still. And here's what I've also noticed, that most people and most leaders have not really done this work. They dabble in it. If you're to look at that orange, green, teal again, if orange is the world that we know, the competitive world where hard work and striving for success gives us what we want, it gives us status, it gives us security, it gives us whatever we kind of, the vacations, the lifestyle, it gives us all these things, it gives us the respect of our peers. That's the orange world. And there's that teal world where all of that has fallen away. It's all had to fall away because the journey of transformation requires that. Most people get into that green zone very nicely, and they dabble in it. But there's a lot of fear about going the distance, a lot of fear of what will this mean if I go the distance? What will this mean to my family if I really truly go the distance into myself and really look at why I do what I do and why I experience the way I experience and why I choose what I choose? How much of this has been what has been programmed into me since childhood about what I should value? If I walk away from this job today that I don't really love, but I'm really successful at it, people will think I'm crazy. And yes, they might. And so people just dabble. It's like they have one foot in each world. It's kind of, but they don't go the distance. But to become a teal leader, you got to go beyond dabbling. To become a teal coach, you have to go beyond dabbling. Right? So the question I'm going to put to you right now, and this is just in total self-honesty for yourself. You don't have to type this in or answer this, anyone but yourself, is like, what kind of a coach or leader are you? Truly, honestly, what kind of a coach or leader are you aspiring to be? If you notice that your style is transactional, you're thinking, yeah, maybe it's time for me to grow a little bit more within myself, move beyond some of this action-oriented, results-driven, achievement-oriented kind of coaching and living in my own life and start to really look at, yeah, well, maybe it's time to really get to know myself a bit more. Now, I'm suspecting many people here, if not most, are kind of in the developmental range. Right? But to go the distance, to become a true transformational coach, you have to commit unwaveringly to the path of your own transformation. To go deeper than you may know, you have to go deep. To really start to look at all those constructs that you've been carrying for so long that you may never have chosen for yourself, that they were taught to you. And so therefore, I'm going to put this to all of you folks. Coach as leader, a transformational coach is a leader. It's more than skill sets. It's more than tools. It's more than being a coach-like leader. A transformational coach who's gone the distance, who's on the journey to knowing themselves at the core, to standing authentic in this world, free of needing to be something for anyone. They start to embody higher consciousness. They simply become teal leaders. It's not something you learn. It's something you simply grow into. It literally, as you grow in these ways, teal leadership just emerges in you. It emerges in you. It's like nature, it just emerges in you, and you stand as a teal leader. And you stand as a teal leader. Yeah. You will stand as this. It's not something you need to go learn. It's something you become. These are qualities of beingness, of the one who has said yes to the heroic adventure to transform their inner reality and really embrace new levels of personal consciousness. Yeah. And when you do, as a Teal coach or Teal leader, you will create soulful workplaces with authenticity, community, passion, and purpose. I'm going to stop there, Subhash. I think this might be a good time to just wrap and see if there are questions, if there are thoughts, comments. Subhash, if you just would like to field that, that'd be great. Yeah, because I shared a lot. So folks, any part of what I spoke to, you're welcome to question on. It's all good. Yeah.
So, Iyer, are you there? If you're there, you can come on. You can ask a question, or Prakash, you can go first. There's a question from Prakash Leon.
Correct.
How does a leader balance short term and long term? So, do organizations move from red to green over a period of time? Meanwhile, I'll try to get them.
I'm sorry. I'm hearing a couple of questions there. I'm not sure which one is
the first one. Prakash Seshadri at the top.
Okay, so this presentation isn't about balancing short-term and long-term, so I'm not sure what that really means. Do organizations move from red to green over a period of time? It'll very much depend. It's kind of like asking, do things evolve naturally, or do they need some kind of stimulus for them to evolve? So my guess is that some organizations naturally inherently begin to grow and evolve of their own kind of volition, and others may need stimulus for that to grow. I think it's just like in nature. We see evolution happening. Some is stimulated and some just is of its own accord. Red organizations, though, are, fairly control or command and control. You can get a sense of those kind of organizations, and they have their own very much vested interest in staying the way they are. So for an organization like that to move up, even to amber, which is the orange, may take some real work on the part of the leadership of that red organization, because the vested interest in staying red is high. Don't forget, those are fear-driven organizations in big part, fear and power. So moving beyond that, well, that's fearful. Yeah. What's the next question you had there?
So there is a couple of questions on any good examples of Teal organizations.
Yeah, actually, I'd love to give you examples, but just to save some time, grab the book or just type online Teal organizations. There's loads. Patagonia is one that comes off the top of my head. The Center for Transformational Coaching, no joke, comes off the top of my head. It's one of, I can even speak about my own organization in this way. And this is so much of where my own understanding of this comes from. It's not that I'm speaking about this from a book. It's that when I began to build the center and to start to create it as an organization, it came from me as this transformational coach, that I didn't want to build an organization that was any different to the way that I was working with people to grow their inner reality. And I started to notice that actually when you do that, when you create an organization in which, okay, maybe I'll put it this way, I have no goals for my organization. I have no objectives for my organization. I have only the evolutionary purpose of the organization. So here's how it goes. If you grab a group of people together and you don't give them any 1 year or 5 year plan, no goals to hit, no benchmarks, and you say, okay, how would you like to organize yourselves based on passion, interest, mission? How would you like to organize yourself? The organization starts to create itself, and it creates something that you cannot foresee. It creates something that is of the evolutionary purpose of the organization, but you can't plan for it. So you plan, okay, here's my 1 year plan. We're going to drive to that. This is your job, your job, your job, and we're going to empower each other. This is green, kind of orange-green, and we're going to move there. What happens when you drop all of that and just allow the organization to create itself? So yeah, there's loads of organizations. I think he's got about 5 or 6 in his book that he highlights, and by giving living examples, yeah, and more online.
There's one more question, Leon, on do you say the space for this happening right now? I mean, is there an actual shift in consciousness happening? This I'm adding now. Is there an actual shift in consciousness around all this chaos around us? From Vidhu.
Is there a shift in consciousness in the chaos itself?
Yeah.
It really depends. It really depends. I think there are going to be many, many people on this planet for whom chaos equals fear. And fear does not lead necessarily to a movement in consciousness. And they will operate from fear. They will hold on tighter to what they know. They'll become more resistant to change, and they'll hold on tightly. But there is also something else that's happening in all of this, where people are learning to be okay in the breakdown and the collapse of old systems that no longer serve us. And this, folks, I write about this in my book. This is what the transformational journey is. The transformational journey is a journey of collapse and rebirth. So what's collapsing is that old self-concept. In a societal level, we'll say old systems that were built under old levels of consciousness. They no longer work, so they start to collapse. So we have 2 ways we can be in that collapse. We can be fearful. Oh my God, what's happening? Everything that I've known to be true about this world is collapsing around me. And yet this is the world I know. This is the world I believe. This is the world I value. This is terrible. And we judge it as this, right? It's terrible. It's awful. It's horrible. And I'm not denying suffering, okay? I'm just saying that this is a perspective. Sure. But what happens when you go through a transformational journey where that same collapse happens inside yourself and you go through the terror of that? It's called, for some, dark night of the soul. In the hero's journey, he puts it called, the movement to the abyss, where you're kind of looking in at that, fiery depth of self. And it's a feeling like, complete loss of self-identity, a self of control. And you learn to just lean into that. And when you learn to lean into the fear and to be with the fear, it starts to kind of heal. When you start to bring higher consciousness, love, the open heart, open mind, open will to it, begins to really kind of assuage those fearful feelings. And soon we begin to transcend. So there are going to be people who learn how to be in the collapse. And those are the ones that are going to lead the ones who are drawn into fear through the collapse. So movement of evolution through stages in organizations and leaderships is not without concern, fear, and collapse, trepidation. It's going to happen. It's going to happen even through the movement of green to teal. It's not always la, 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 everything's so beautiful. Right? It can be really hard. So that's a long answer to your question, Subhash. But yeah, I think it's going to very much depend on the person and the societies.
I want to build up on that question, from Ganga Priya. How does a teal leader bring his or her team along to create a teal organization? That the leader might be a teal. Yeah. How does he or she bring the entire team? Good question.
Right. Right. And this is one of the major challenges that I actually have with Frederick Laloux's book. She's put her finger right on it. The challenge that I have to his book is that his book, not the first part, which outlines the characteristics of teal, but the second part goes towards identifying best practices of teal organizations so that people who aspire to develop teal organizations can simply implement those best practices, and voila, we have a teal organization. And I am resolutely, and he may be too if I was to ask him, saying that that's not ever going to happen. You cannot best practice your way into a teal organization. But because he's put that into his book, a teal leader will think, I just need to best practice. If I can just show my team how to hold space, naturally, they're going to do it. But what I've been saying the whole time today is that Teal organizations are created through Teal leaders. They are in a particular state of consciousness and a paradigm of consciousness that cannot be understood, maybe vaguely, like I kind of get what you're talking about, but that trust thing, yeah, like I kind of trust, but not really. They don't fully grasp it. So it's not that you can just move people along into it through best practices. You can try, but you're going to have a lot of resistance. Better yet, you invite people to go on their own transformational journey. Hire a transformational coach. Invite them to go in and start to really do that deep inner work. And what will happen is they will begin to emerge in the light of their authentic self as Teal leaders, because that is what a Teal leader is. They are the authentic one. They are the one who is self-actualizing, who is knowing that core self. That is the Teal leader. So when people go on that journey, then you will create Teal organizations. And I'm blessed in the Center for Transformational Coaching because every single person on my team has done the coursework and has gone the journey. Doesn't mean everybody's, transformed or whatever that means, but we're all sharing that inner reality, and therefore we can create it as an external reality.
Here is a good tactical question, which I think we won't hear from you. Curious to know if ACC is transactional, PCC developmental, MCC transformational. Can you assist from Ashok?
Yeah, there may be some loose connection in that way. I don't really go there myself because I've seen a lot of masterful MCC developmental coaches, because it's still very much about form. It's still about form. And that's where, the form gets far more organic at MCC, that is for sure, but it's still about form. But there's something there. I won't completely deny it. But I'm going to come back to this. If you are a transactional human being, in the sense that your life is still very much about a sense of worth and value based on what you achieve, what you have, positions, education, salary, if that is still the main driver of your sense of self-worth, then you're going to coach transactionally, because that's where you're at, right? You're not necessarily going to, and you might get an MCC certification, but the core of your work is still there, if that makes sense. Yeah.
Perfectly, yeah.
Yeah.
So would team coaching succeed here to build a Teal organization from coordinating?
Sorry.
Would team coaching succeed in building a Teal organization?
Well, I'll just go back to my original answer that a Teal organization needs to be developed by having a critical mass of Teal leaders. So whether you use team coaching or individual coaching, I'm not sure that necessarily will make a difference. It's more of a question of what is it that you're asking the people in your organization to really pay attention to. And if you're asking them to pay attention to their responsibilities and their deadlines and making sure things get project teams and and you're not asking them to say, the most important thing in your life right now is your own inner journey into yourself, then it doesn't matter what kind of coaching you're doing, you're going to have a harder time giving rise to a Teal organization. It all comes back to whether people have gone on the journey themselves. Yeah. Less about the form of coaching.
So Prasenjit asks, is there something beyond Teal leadership? Is there something beyond?
Well, that's a very good question.
Yes.
And my guess is yes. I'm not sure how to formulate it myself. Even Frederick Laloux at the beginning of his book says the same thing. There's probably another level beyond, but our consciousness, whatever our consciousness is today collectively, is so far capable of conceiving of the paradigm we're calling Teal. And even if that higher level was put in front of us today, from our own state of consciousness, we may not even get it. we'd be like, oh, that's impossible. You can't do that. You know, because again, if we're not kind of living into or near that level of consciousness, we're not going to grasp it. It won't really make sense to us. And therefore we might even resist it. Even Teals might resist the next level of consciousness simply because it's beyond what they can conceive of. So I won't say no. I won't say there's not another level. I just can't conceive of what it may be. But I suspect if there is, it's remarkable. Just like watching nature grow, something like that. Just beautiful. Yeah.
There are a couple of questions on what should leaders do, you know, at an action stage. Is there anything else that you want to add about this? I can see that is a common struggle.
Yeah, what a great question. So let me just go right here, right? As I put this up earlier, right? So the question is, what do leaders do? So where does that question fall out? That's a transactional question. It's like bringing a knife to a gunfight, right? Terrible metaphor, but kind of true. Like you're bringing a gun to a knife fight. You're asking a transactional question about transformational evolutionary growth. So the question is not, what do I do? The question is, who do I be? That's a big question, right? Like, who do you be, right? Good question. Who do you be? And then you have to tap into the core essence of yourself, like, and tap into what is emerging in you at that deepest level and give space for that to emerge. And again, onion kind of image, there's a lot of these hard layers of the egoic self-concept that need to dissolve, be healed, be released before we can really get a sense of that core essence self. But that's the work of the being level or being driven leader, is to notice that as they try to embody new ways of being, old ways of being are going to get in the way. And those become the foundation for the coaching experience. But what in those old ways of being that continue to get in the way do we need to draw attention to and really understand and perhaps even heal? Right?
Thanks,
if you've never dealt with your trauma from childhood, don't think that doesn't affect you today as a leader or a coach. It absolutely does, right? It all matters, all those layers.
I'm mindful of the time. Two last questions, Leon. You're done with the deck, or is there anything more you want to share? I can still
No, I can close this. I can close this too,
so,
yeah. And then thank you. I know people will be dropping off. That's fine if folks need to drop off. It's been great. Thank you.
Thank you.
But yeah, I'll stick around for a bit. No problem. Thank you.
Two
I appreciate
questions.
this.
What is transformation versus transcending as you see it?
Sorry, one more time, please.
Transformation versus transcendence, if I can rephrase it.
Okay, yeah, those are two words that are kind of pointing to the same thing. Transformation, the way I look at it, is a what's the best word? A renewal of self. A renewal of self. Maybe that's an easy way to put it. If you look at the butterfly or caterpillar to butterfly image, it is an altogether restructuring of what we understand ourselves to be into something altogether different. Transcendence is a different image. Transcendence means to kind of move above, right? So transcendence can happen in terms of an inner experience when you do transformational work. We begin to transcend old levels of consciousness, old behaviors, different patterns of emotion and attitude. We start to transcend these, and we begin to then perceive in the kind of awakening mind new realities of possibility and potential that the old mind, if you will, the egoic mind, could not conceive of. So the transformational work, that journey of kind of death and renewal, gives rise to a transcended human being. At least this is how I'm interpreting it. I'm not holding that to be the truth for everybody. Okay, folks, it's just, that's how I interpret it. Yeah.
Last question, Leon.
Thank you, Yvonne.
So this is a personal question, if you can take this. Who is your inspiration leader / coach, and what quality inspired you? You inspire a lot of us, Leon. Sorry to interrupt you.
No, that's okay.
You
That's
inspire many
perfectly
of
okay.
us who have had the privilege of learning with you. So who was your inspiration? Great question, Srinivas.
This may be the hardest question of the day. I'm not joking, because I haven't had any leadership inspiration like this that we're talking about here. It's one of the reasons I hadn't read a leadership book for 10 or 15 years, is because I was missing the connection to human consciousness that I was looking for, that I found in Frederick Laloux's work. So it's not that Frederick Laloux is that person, but he's pointing to something. And I'm very happy to have found this body of work and to see just how it connects right to the body of work that I have created, in the sense knowing that as we do the transformational work as coaches and people, we grow into what he's called a Teal leader. But I more am inspired by great thinkers of our time. Like I mentioned, Dr. David Hawkins and his work on human consciousness, just being able to understand that. Janet Hagberg's work, great book called Real Power, Personal Power in Organizations, very inspiring work. I'm more drawn to that than, say, a figure of leadership today. I'm sorry, folks, I wish I could throw it out there. I don't have one. Yeah.
Thank you, Leon.
Thank you.
Once again, yeah. Thank you everyone who joined us, and happy leading the Teal way. Yeah, thank you, Leon.
Yeah,
any closing remarks? Back to you.
Thank you everyone for being here. Nice to see some familiar names coming up as well. Thank you for joining. I've had a great time, Subhash. Thank you for having me, just allowing this conversation to be had. I so appreciate it.
Thank you, Leon. And we hope to get you back sometime. Sure. Yeah.
I'd love to. I'd love to. We could dive into any of these aspects more deeply. Be happy to do that. Yeah. So I'll say good night to everybody.
Take care.
Until next time.
Good night, everyone.
Thank you all. Bye-bye.